Oddly enough, on this Reign of Christ Sunday, also called Christ the King Sunday, our lectionary text this morning is about a different king. The Psalms are usually attributed to King David, Israel's most beloved king, and allegedly the ancestor of Jesus himself. King David was also a musician, and it's said that he wrote over 3,500 of these psalms during the course of his life. Being as he was king, it's no surprise that these songs that he wrote are often of a political nature. Songs for deliverance from rival kingdoms, songs of thanksgiving for national prosperity, and songs of adoration for Jerusalem, home to king and God alike. Jerusalem, this Psalm 46 reminds us, can never be destroyed. Still, it's not without its flaws, and neither is its king.
A reading from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city. It shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Hear now what the Spirit is saying to the church. Amen.
Please pray with me. Everlasting God, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of all of our hearts glorify you, and may they be in keeping always with the teachings of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. There are some things that simply cannot be destroyed. I came across a McDonald's chicken nugget once that was completely indestructible. Tried to cut it, beat it with a claw hammer, jumped up and down upon it. I attacked it with a handsaw, but nothing could penetrate its thick, greasy crust. I think it could have survived being thrown into a volcano, or even the vacuum of space if you sent it up there, perhaps one day devastating a very small civilization on the edge of the galaxy, like a giant asteroid. And then there's the internet. Indestructible. For all practical purposes, it's unbreakable. Rival nations, even unscrupulous rogue hackers, are capable of inflicting damage to digital infrastructure. Coordinated DDoS attacks can bring down whole networks, but no one has the power to destroy the entire internet. Still, that didn't stop a man in the Chinese city of Weifang from trying. This wasn't the work of ISIS or some extremist group. The man in question, identified only as Lou, just wanted a little privacy. You see, over the summer, Lou had taken part in a neighborhood square dancing festival. And while he was kicking up dust, dancing his heart out, he noticed some people in the crowd pointing at him and laughing and taking pictures. Now, in China, square dancing is apparently popular amongst older women. And this young guy, Lou, suddenly became very self-conscious about his participation in the whole thing. And the more he dwelled on it, the more paranoid he got, fearing that these pictures would end up online and his manly reputation would be forever besmirched. I can relate. There used to be some things about me on the internet that are, thankfully, gone. Don't try to find them. When I was 15, in the earliest days of the World Wide Web, as we know it, I asked my brother to make a website about me. It prominently featured a photograph of me wielding a samurai sword, along with terrible Gothic poetry that I'd written. The top of the homepage was emblazoned with the words, Seth's Dark Haven, spelled out with Comic Sans typeface. As I got older, I remembered that site and asked my brother to take it down. But Lou, poor Lou, had no such recourse. There was nothing he could do to protect himself from these embarrassing square dancing images that might surface online. His only recourse, he decided, was to destroy the entire internet once and for all. Theoretically, it's possible, but it's easier said than done. There's no virus, no cyber attack capable of it. The net was built to be self-repairing and extremely resilient. In order to accomplish its destruction, which, by the way, would be a terrible idea, you'd have to carry out a three-tiered assault on the internet's physical infrastructure. You see, it's all basically a machine, an enormous, nearly indestructible machine whose tendrils enfold the entire world. To bring it down for good, you'd have to sever thousands of steel cables that run across the ocean floor all over the earth. You'd have to destroy the 13 root servers located in heavily fortified corporate offices. And finally, you'd have to take out each of the 4,048 data centers spread across 116 countries. And you'd have to do it all at the same time, lest the repairs outpace the damage. Our dear Lou, ignorant of how all this works, tried to break the internet with a hammer. He found 4 little optical network boxes around town and smashed them with a hammer. Needless to say, the internet survived, and Lou was arrested for damaging public property. But you've got to admire his can-do attitude, even if it resembles nothing more than a child trying to destroy a tank with his bare hands. There are some things that simply cannot be destroyed. The 46th Psalm, written by King David about 3,000 years ago, give or take a few, aims to remind us of that. David's reign as the second king of Israel is often remembered as a kind of golden age amongst the Jewish people. Free from the poverty of the wilderness, settled at last in the promised land in Jerusalem, and enjoying a kind of prosperity that they'd never known before. But that doesn't mean that Jerusalem was a utopia or a paragon of virtue by our standards. People kept slaves. Women had few rights of their own. The temple, which depended on animal sacrifice, was an economic engine that favored the wealthy. And King David himself was a complex character. While a national hero and a devout man, he was no Boy Scout. He was also a womanizer and a brutal political opportunist who dealt with his enemies harshly. And while King David ultimately did prosper over rival kingdoms, that's not to say that his reign was peaceful. On the contrary, Jerusalem was embattled, much as it's always been. David and his armies had to fight off the Philistines, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Arameans, and just about every kingdom and tribe in the ancient Levant. With this psalm, David comforts his people in the midst of perpetual warfare, He reminds them that though the nations are in an uproar and the kingdoms totter, God is in the midst of their beloved city. As such, Jerusalem cannot be moved, it cannot be shaken. Like God, it cannot be destroyed. Here in the United States, we face our own challenges. There are outside threats to national security to consider, certainly, but it's not as if there are vast armies on our doorstep, pressing in from all sides. No, our greatest concerns come from within. We're afraid of our neighbors, afraid even of our own government. I don't want to dwell on this, but I can't ignore it either, especially not in light of this text. In these post-election weeks, some people are afraid that our grand American experiment is falling apart. In the words of David, the nations are in an uproar and the kingdoms totter. And not just any nation, ours. Now, I don't believe that America gets any exclusive protection from God, as David claims about Jerusalem. I don't believe that God is confined to national borders. But I will say that America is not so easily broken. Certainly not by a single man or woman, regardless of their place in the hierarchy. Last week, in an attempt to find some humor in these anxious times, the comedian Samantha Bee blamed herself for the outcome of the election. It was my fault, she said. Yesterday I voted in an American election for the first time, and I broke America. Obviously, that's a joke. We're a multifaceted, democratic entity built to survive singular events. Like the internet, there are just too many systems in place to keep it from crashing altogether. So no, I don't think America is in any imminent danger of collapse. It's not indestructible, but it's remarkably resilient. That said, there are things that could change in ways that really do hurt some people. And that's what I worry about. I worry about people. You. Me. Them. Us. Communities. Individuals. Muslims. Immigrants. The LGBTQ community. The average American is far more vulnerable than America writ large. And some are more vulnerable than others. I heard a riveting piece on NPR about a week ago from the writer Binish Ahmed about what her experience as a Muslim is like in America these days. She tells the story of being on a subway car in New York City and noticing a suspicious-looking man just a few feet away wearing camouflage and a ski mask. His eyes darted around nervously and then settled on Ahmed and her friend, a bearded Muslim man. She grew uncomfortable, wondering if this guy might be a white supremacist, wondering if maybe he had a gun, wondering if they were about to become victims of a hate crime. Now, you may be thinking that she was stereotyping this white guy as much as he may have been stereotyping Ahmed and her friend. And yeah, I guess she was. But when you live in a country where mosques are regularly vandalized and Muslims are sometimes attacked outright, you don't always have the luxury of giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. Growing increasingly nervous, she told her friend that they needed to leave. So they got off at the next stop and they raced down the subway platform to catch another train. And while they were running, she became painfully aware of NYPD counterterrorism agents that were patrolling the station and wondered what this might have looked like to them. They were, in her words, scanning, no doubt, for just the sort of suspicious behavior we were exhibiting, she muses. Running while brown. Skittish while Muslim. And then something even worse occurred to her. Perhaps these cops were responding to an actual terrorist threat in the subway system, maybe a bomb or an active shooter in these subterranean tunnels where the walls seemed to be closing in. Running from this suspicious stranger, worried that the police might think she was suspicious, she realized that she was simultaneously fearful of some and feared by others. That's the reality that set in as my friend and I caught our breath in the relative safety of a different subway car, she reflects. I felt something that I never felt before, that I was seen as a suspect and could be a victim all at once. Fear doubled. Now, for all we know, Bina Shamed was just being paranoid, leaping at shadows. But that's entirely beside the point, because the fear is real and not unjustified. This is a particularly intense scenario, but this fear of being targeted by hateful strangers, by the police, by legislated injustice, this fear is what some of the most vulnerable people in our society live with every day. It's not enough to echo the psalmist, to say that God is their refuge. It's just not enough. To leave it at that is a platitude. We've all got to look out for each other, especially now. In the wake of the election, there's been a spate of hate crimes and outspoken declarations from white nationalists. The Southern Poverty Law Center that tracks these things has verified 701 incidents of threats, insults, racist graffiti, and outright assault in the last 2 weeks, a number far above the national average. Now, whether these are a few isolated incidents or a harbinger of things to come, we don't know. But let's not speculate even. Regardless of what the next few years holds for our country, we also need to acknowledge that injustice is already deeply embedded in our society. It's not new. Some of it goes all the way down to the bedrock. Systemic injustice is an insidious apparatus, an enormous, nearly indestructible machine whose tendrils enfold our otherwise great nation. It's coiled around our broken criminal justice system, embedded in the labyrinthine path to citizenship. Its algorithms coded into our laws. Its old prejudices hardwired into our skulls. Dismantling this machine is not a job for one person. You can't break it with a hammer. But it's not indestructible. Together we can take its more inhumane mechanisms apart and reclaim our humanity, one piece at a time. There's a wonderful old Japanese story about a boy who lost everything, literally everything. You see, his father was an ancient warlord named Daigo Kamitsu, who made a pact with 48 demons. In exchange for political power, he offers each of these devils a part of his unborn son's body. As the tale goes, the boy is born malformed, without arms or legs or even a face, born with nothing at all. And the boy's mother, afraid of what Daigo might do to what's left of him, sends the helpless child upriver in a little basket, just like Moses, towards whatever fate might await him. Now, before long, the baby is discovered by a doctor who takes him under his care and raises him. The doctor equips him with special prostheses that allow him to see and talk and move about freely. In one prosthetic arm, the doctor grafts a blade with the power to fight devils and other supernatural entities. The child is effectively reborn, takes the name Hakiamaru, and being made of replaceable parts, he's basically indestructible. And now grown, he sets out on a journey to defeat each of the 48 demons and reclaim his real body from them, one piece at a time. This is why I love Japanese culture. We get Pinocchio, and they come up with this. Same story, more or less, but they're so much cooler. And there's a valuable lesson in it, too, which is to say that a hollow collection of systems is no replacement for our humanity. Sure, we can put things in place to keep America safe. We can build a wall along the Mexican border. We can refuse to let refugees into our country. We can come down hard on nonviolent crime. We can dictate inflexible religious beliefs and family values. We can do all of those things. And I guess America will be safe. But it will be hollow. It will be little more than a collection of bureaucratic prosthetics that have been clumsily duct taped together, dragging ourselves along. More ink and red tape than man. Indestructible, maybe, but also inhuman. A few days ago, my son Ethan woke me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He was wearing a Captain America t-shirt and a Superman cape draped around his shoulders, and he flexed his skinny little arms as he declared his intentions. "My name is Super America," he said, "and I'm going to save America." I didn't have the heart to tell him that this superhero he'd invented was painfully derivative, especially with the Captain America shirt he was wearing, but it was sweet. He was too young to even know what America needs saving from. I'm not sure we could even all agree on that point. And Super America certainly can't do it alone, but the sentiment is encouraging. On a similar note, I saw an encouraging photograph this week. Someone had spray painted a swastika on a playground, and the children who hang out there had covered it up with a bunch of hearts that they'd cut out of paper, scrawled with messages of peace upon them. There are some things that simply cannot be destroyed. Our faith, our resolve, our hope, and our God. And on this Christ the King Sunday, we remember where true power and sovereignty lies, in the hearts of those who would follow Jesus' commandments and work for love and peace in the world. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone. The psalmist says that God is our refuge, and that's true. Says that God is our strength, and that's true. But God also calls us to build a refuge for others, a mighty fortress from which we can work together to dismantle the various mechanisms of injustice in our society and restore our common humanity. I don't know how many there are. 48? 100? 1,000? I don't know. I only know that they aren't as indestructible as they seem. Amen.